The roar of my truck's engine echoed through the vastness of the Arizona desert as I, John, traveled along the legendary Route 66 that night in 1995. The sky was pitch black, dotted with stars that seemed to observe my journey with a silent and unsettling curiosity. Beside me, Mike, my longtime friend and co-pilot, dozed with his head against the window, his face sporadically illuminated by the headlights of the rare cars passing in the opposite direction. The radio crackled, picking up only fragments of distant stations, like ghostly whispers lost in the immensity of the night. I had driven this route countless times, but something about that dawn felt different, as if the very air was charged with a strange and oppressive energy. I glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard, 2:47 a.m. Fatigue was starting to weigh on my eyelids, but I knew I couldn't stop. We had an important delivery to make in Los Angeles, and time was tight. I took another sip of the cold coffee in the plastic cup, feeling the bitter taste spread across my parched mouth. And then I saw it. On the horizon, a solitary figure walked along the side of the road. As we approached, I could make out its shape more clearly. A tall, slender silhouette, cloaked in black, which flowed gently despite the absence of wind. Something about the sight made my stomach twist in a way I had never felt before. "Mike," I called, nudging my friend. "Mike, wake up! There's someone on the road." Mike stirred, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Huh? What?" "Look there," I pointed, slowing the truck down. "There's someone walking. I think we should stop and see if they need help." Mike leaned forward, squinting to see better in the darkness. "Man, that's weird. Who the hell would be walking in the middle of nowhere at this hour?" I knew he was right, but something inside me, maybe a mix of curiosity and a distorted sense of duty, compelled me to stop. Slowly, I pulled the truck over onto the shoulder, a few meters ahead of the mysterious figure. "John, I'm not sure this is a good idea," Mike murmured, his voice laden with apprehension. I ignored his warning and opened the truck door. The desert's cold air hit me like a slap, carrying with it a strange smell, something between damp earth and decay. A shiver ran down my spine, but I attributed it to the sudden drop in temperature. "Hey!" I shouted to the approaching figure. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" There was no response. The figure kept advancing at a steady and disturbingly slow pace. The closer it got, the faster my heart raced. There was something deeply wrong about the scene, something beyond the mere strangeness of the situation. When the figure stopped about 3 meters away, the real horror began to unfold. Slowly, like a nightmare in slow motion, the figure lifted its head. The hood of the cloak slid back, revealing not a face but a skull, white, polished, and completely devoid of flesh. 2 empty eye sockets stared at me, emanating a darkness deeper than the night itself. My scream stuck in my throat. My muscles froze, refusing to obey my brain's desperate command to run. The smell of decay intensified, wrapping around me like a putrid shroud. "John, get in the truck now!" Mike's desperate scream finally snapped me out of the trance. I turned and ran, stumbling over my own feet, feeling as if invisible hands were trying to pull me back. I barely shut the door before Mike slammed on the gas. The truck roared to life, tires screeching on the asphalt. I glanced in the rearview mirror, my heart nearly stopping at the sight of the skeletal figure standing in the middle of the road, its black cloak billowing against all the laws of physics. "What the hell was that?" Mike shouted, his face pale and drenched in sweat. I had no answer. My mind refused to process what we had just witnessed. For hours, we drove in silence, occasionally exchanging glances of pure terror, as if speaking about what had happened might somehow make it more real. The rest of the trip passed in a feverish blur. We delivered the load in Los Angeles, but I barely remember the details. All I could think about was that figure on the road, that white skull, and those empty eye sockets that seemed to have looked directly into my soul. 2 days later, I received the news that would change my life forever. Mike was dead. Apparently, on his way back home, his truck had veered off the road at the same stretch of Route 66 where we had encountered the skeletal figure. The authorities spoke of fatigue, of possible drowsiness at the wheel. But I knew the truth. That thing, whatever it was, had come for one of us. Years passed, but the memories of that night never left me. I gave up long-haul driving, unable to return to the open roads. The nightmares were constant. I always found myself on that dark road, staring at that white skull, feeling the weight of death on my shoulders. I sought answers in occult books, in Native American legends, and conspiracy theories about secret government experiments. Nothing satisfied me. Nothing explained what we had seen. A decade after the incident, on a particularly dark night, I decided I needed to go back. Not for closure, not for answers, but perhaps for some twisted form of redemption. I rented a car and headed for Arizona, my heart heavy with a mixture of fear and determination. Route 66 was different, busier, more touristy. But as night fell and I approached the exact spot where everything had happened, I felt that same oppressive energy from years ago. I parked on the shoulder exactly where we had stopped that fateful night. The desert was silent, the air still. I stepped out of the car, my legs trembling, and looked at the dark road ahead. And there it was, the same figure, the same black cloak, standing a few meters away. My heart raced, my mouth went dry, but this time I didn't run. I walked toward the apparition, each step feeling like it lasted an eternity. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice breaking the desert's sepulchral silence. "What do you want?" The figure slowly lifted its head, once again revealing the white skull and empty sockets. But this time, something was different. Deep within those dark cavities, I saw a flicker. Not of malice or threat, but of infinite, ancient sorrow. A voice echoed in my mind, not spoken, but felt. "I am what all fear, but what all will one day meet. I do not choose, I simply am." I understood then that I was standing before death itself. Not an evil entity, but a force of nature, as inevitable as the setting sun or the changing of the seasons. "Why Mike?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "Why not me?" The answer came as a whisper on the wind. There is no why. There is only what is and what must be. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The fear that had consumed me for years dissipated, replaced by a melancholic acceptance. I realized that Mike hadn't been chosen, just as I hadn't been spared. We were all part of a larger cycle, incomprehensible in its entirety. The figure began to fade, like smoke carried away by the wind. Before it disappeared completely, I heard one final message. "Live, John. Live with the awareness of the end, but without the fear of it." I stood there alone on the dark road for what felt like an eternity. When I finally returned to the car, I felt different. The terror had been replaced by a strange peace. In the years that followed, I went back to driving. I traveled Route 66 countless times, always keeping a watchful eye on the horizon. I never saw the hooded figure again, but its presence somehow always stayed with me. I learned to live with the awareness of death, not as a threatening shadow, but as a silent companion on my journey. Each mile traveled, each sunrise witnessed became a precious reminder of life's fragility and beauty. And sometimes, on the darkest nights, when the desert's silence is broken only by the roar of the engine, I think of Mike. I think of the figure on the road, and I smile, knowing that one day, when my own journey comes to an end, I will meet them both again on the great highway that we all must inevitably travel. Until then, I keep driving, carrying with me the lessons of that haunted night on Route 66. A constant reminder that life, no matter how long it seems, is just a brief stop on a much larger journey.